All right. Welcome back to All Cars Y'all. I am John. It is time for another Motorweek retro review reaction. And this week, yes, the Motorweek gods have blessed us. It is the 1987 Dodge Shadow and Plymouth Sundance. Two cars that, spoiler alert, I love. So I can't wait to see what they say about them when they were brand new. I have a suspicion. I know what they're going to say. These are still based on the K cars. These are still derivatives of the original K car. But as always, grab your beverage of choice, sit back in your comfy chair, and let's take a trip down memory lane to 1987. Oh, this is going to be a good one.
Motorweek is made possible by Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper and TireRack.com.
Well, a Chrysler-made front-drive V6. That's good to hear. Thanks, Beth. Now, that new J-body, along with Chrysler's better-known joint project with Maserati, are part of a current trend in the auto industry. Everybody wants to make upmarket cars. Obviously, upmarket models are not only more prestigious, they're also a lot more profitable. So it's probably no surprise that Chrysler seems to be one of the most aggressive companies following this trend, though this time it was almost as much a matter of circumstance as it was a plan. That plan has spawned the Chrysler P cars, the 1987 Dodge Shadow and Plymouth Sundance, subcompacts for that currently popular upwardly mobile marketplace.
So right off the bat, let's talk about the interesting introduction. This was not quite what I expected, but styling. I love these cars, man. I really do. They've always, let's get the negative out of the way. They've always struck me as a little narrow and tall, and I don't love the front end. The two individual headlights and a thin grille, a little Ford Escort-ish from the 80s, but overall, a humble, honest car. You know what I mean? It just a greenhouse, high deck lid, truncated trunk. I just love these cars. I really do. I hope they say a lot more about the handling, powertrains, and interior, obviously, things like that. But overall, when you think about the late 80s, mid to late 80s, and you've got the GM small cars like the Cavalier out there. You've got the Ford Escort. Of the American cars, I think this is by far the best. Let's see what they say.
With a wheelbase of 97 inches, the P car fits neatly between the K car Aries Reliant and L car Omni Horizon. Their sedan shapes are really well-disguised hatchbacks, and one look at either the 3- or 5-door tells you they're both handsomely styled and well-equipped for their slightly higher-class mission.
Well, that's interesting. See, I've always thought of these as the smallest of the Chrysler offerings. I know the Omni and the Horizon kind of drug on for a long time, but this was the entry level to me. And yeah, sure, they had like the Dodge Colt, partnered with Mitsubishi. So it's interesting that I think of this as the economy car, and they're presenting it as a up-trim option. And specifically to like the Reliant and the Aries. Very interesting. My memory must be failing me a little bit about this specific period. I had a friend whose family had one of these. And I've always thought of it as a very basic, generic, entry-level car, not as a more upscale offering. But I will say, even, from this angle, let's talk about it again. I love the rear end of this. And I love the, the Spirit. I did a reaction video to those probably a year ago, something like that. I love those as well. So this whole late 80s Chrysler really, really does it for me in terms of their styling, even though it's not going to go down in history. It's tidy, it's clean, generic, but I love it.
But it wasn't always. Originally, the P-Car was supposed to replace the basic transportation L-body Omni Horizon. But when import restrictions with the Japanese were relaxed, Chrysler concluded it couldn't make a bargain basement car in the U.S. and sell it at a profit. At the same time, many buyers were opting for smaller cars with more style. So the P-Car's target market was changed and the design enhanced. There isn't any stripped base model. In fact, there's only one trim level for the Plymouth Sundance, two for the Dodge Shadow. The top Shadow is the Turbo Performance ES. It's designated by blacked-out trim, a red stripe around the body, and very impressive unidirectional Eagle VR50 tires on 15-inch cast rims.
Okay, so first off, let's all laugh at 15-inch rims. Wish they would come back. But that's so fascinating to me because, again, I remember this as the base level entry American-built Chrysler products. Didn't they have one, it was called the America or the American edition, something like that, which was like a stripper model? I only vaguely remember the Omni and the Horizon overlapping with this. So it's hard to me, this is a Civic competitor, and it always has been, but they're selling it as a little bit more. I'm almost speechless. I'm a little shocked at all this.
There are no suspension changes for the ES compared to other P-Cars. That's because the P-Car is based on the respectable G-body chassis of the Dodge Daytona Chrysler Laser, one of the better handling front drive cars going. That also means the P-Car's components are all typical Chrysler. ISO struts in the front and trailing arms on coil springs joined to a beam axle at the rear. Simple, but from our first drives, most effective. The Shadow Sundance is not only a fine handling car, but it has one of the best combinations of ride and cornering prowess in its class. Part of that is due to extensive marketing research among women. They told Chrysler that the first prototypes lacked handling response. The solution? Fast 14-to-1 steering and only 2.5 turns lock to lock, standard. Turning circle is also parking lot small at 34 feet. The P-Car...
Before they go on to the engine, that was all really fascinating. Very high praise that it handles very well, it rides well, and the comments there about the prototypes tested by women, and they wanted more sharp handling, more sharp responses. That's almost counterintuitive to what I think in the 80s people really expected. But not everybody wants a wallowing ride. And that's a whole video for another day of the manufacturers kept giving us these wallowing, slow rides. The Japanese were doing something different, and it took a long time for people to realize people wanted a good ride, but they wanted a controlled ride and maybe a sharp handling. Very, very interesting. I think there's a big conversation there, but high praise overall.
Also has as standard something most other Chrysler cars don't have: adequate acceleration. This car is tailor-made for the output of Chrysler's 2.2-liter fuel-injected four-cylinder. A 5-speed is standard and an automatic is an option. 0 to 60 by our measure in this prototype car was 12.5 seconds, good for its class. Passing time from 40 to 55 is also good at 5 seconds flat. But drop in the 2.2 turbo and the P-Car really gets rolling. 0 to 60, only 8.8 seconds, and a third gear passing time of 3.8 seconds. Yes, both...
That's really impressive. So, I mean, the base engine is... That's slow. Come on. You know, I'm sure I'm going to get a comment that, well, compared for the time, it wasn't that slow. Come on. That's pretty slow. But 8.8 for the turbo, that's impressive. I would never buy the turbo. But pretty impressive. Pretty impressive.
Engines are still a bit buzzy, but P-Car sound insulation is excellent. Most likely, the smoother 2.5-liter engine with shake-reducing balance shafts will eventually become available. Creature comforts come high on the P-Car list. The standard cloth-covered bucket seats recline and have good body support in all areas.
Okay, before they say anything else, let's talk about this. I like where they were going. I don't like necessarily the execution. I would be very happy in this interior. I like the binnacle. They didn't drag it across the, across the dashboard. Very, very contemporary idea of what it should look like. But that middle part that's just all black, everything just disappears into it. So I like the idea here, and it looks like just tons of cheap plastic. But they did two-tone, right? They did the beige, they did the dark, they were on the right track, but it lacks a certain something, right? And even I want to look at the door panel here and the armrest and the handle. It actually looks like it's slanted back slightly instead of forward. There's a certain lack of ergonomics in here. And I will say I hate that steering wheel. So I like what they were doing, but it wasn't the leap forward that, say, the Neon was later on. But it's okay.
Front headroom is plentiful. Chrysler will offer a lot of luxury options in the P-Car, including a pop-up sunroof, and such things as power windows, door locks, tilt wheel, and power outside mirrors have never been offered in a Chrysler-made subcompact before. One of the things we did find lacking inside the P-Car was dash styling. It functions all right and ventilation is first-rate, but it still looks like it was meant for an inexpensive car.
And there they go again, right? To me, this is the entry-level, basic, cheapest, well, not quite cheapest Chrysler product. And they're talking about, oh, this looks like it was meant for a less expensive car. What market do they think this was aimed for, if not the Civic? Honestly. But it is cool that they offered, power mirrors and all that other stuff, and saying that that's the first for a Chrysler subcompact, because one of the big things that came out of the 80s and even the 90s was the idea that cheap doesn't need to be, small doesn't need to be cheap. And it eventually started to change, where you have things like the Mini now that is very expensive but can be very well equipped. In the old days, small meant stripper. And then you got more loaded as you went up in size. So Chrysler acknowledging that you could have a smaller car, but also have some of those conveniences, very contemporary for them. So glad to hear they acknowledge that, but I don't know what Motorweek is thinking this car is aimed for.
Instrumentation is impressive, with a tach and everything except an oil pressure gauge standard. Yet their faces are all just too plain in appearance. Turbo models have a center-mounted boost gauge. Good and not so good are also apparent in the rear. Entry, even on the two-door, is fine, as is headroom. All models also have either a full or split folding rear seat. But the folding seat is again a frugal design, so the bottom cushion is too low for best comfort. On the other hand, raise the hatch and the P-Car will set a new standard of versatility. It's huge in there, and it reminds you of a Saab 900 hatchback. The sill is high, but again, a change here would have meant a new chassis and much higher manufacturing cost.
Okay, before they move on again, that interior looks super comfortable to me. And I know they're picking on the rear seat maybe being too low, I guess, for perfect comfort. But it is meant to be an economy car. That trunk is cavernous. As you heard a lot in the 80s, high liftover. And that is one of the worst I've seen, right? I mean, there was no cut down at all. And yeah, they're right that going to those really deep cut downs to the bumper, that involves a lot more rigidity working with the chassis. They need that extra structural member back there. But once you got in there, that's a huge trunk. And that's what happens when you get a nice square design. I don't love the liftover, but everything else I like. I like. Me likey.
Which brings us to your cost for the Shadow in Sundance. With its original target as a versatile, economy-minded hatch series and most options of standard Chrysler design, the P-Car is expected to be priced below most of its upwardly mobile competition. Insiders expect a starting price of around $7,200 when first four-door models begin to appear this summer. That level would make the P-Car a class bargain. If it had to remain an entry-level subcompact, prices would have to be about $1,000 less, leaving Chrysler with a break-even project at best. But is this changeling Shadow Sundance going to be able to compete even with new clothes? Well, in our opinion, it'll do well against domestic brands such as Chevrolet Cavaliers and Ford Escorts, but it will have less success against better-regarded imports, such as the Accord 3-door. That is, unless Honda buyers suddenly become price-sensitive. Yet, with production pegged at only 150,000 units next year, the P-Car should be a sellout. And it's one of the best examples yet of how American car companies are trying to adapt to rapidly changing buyer taste. Now, you can tell us about your automotive taste, including what you'd like to see here on Motorweek, by dropping us a line. Our address...
No, we'll stop there. Okay, so that kind of explains it at the end. So, to me, the Accord has always been more midsize. But I guess we need to remember that during the 80s and the 70s, the Accord was more small and the Civic was smaller, right? And it wasn't until later the Accord started to grow into the midsize category. So they're actually comparing this to the Cavalier, the Escort, and the Accord. Not what I had in my mind. To me, it was the Cavalier, the Escort, and the Civic. And if we're being honest, in 1987, again, had a family friend. They had I think it was a Shadow. And I was very, very pro-American. I believed that the Americans built anything the Japanese did and better. I really did. Now I've grown past that. Okay, I understand my folly, but that's how I believed. And so I would not have considered a Civic or a Corolla compared to this. But compared to the Cavalier and the Escort, I think this was a winner. I really, really do. And I know that we can look back with some rose-colored or not glasses and complain about the engine or the quality of the materials or how it held up or even the transmission, whatever. But in terms of style, affordability, and how it actually rode and handled, I've always had a high opinion of this. I was always kind of blown away because, again, if you watch the channel, you know that we had Buicks and Oldsmobiles. In '86, we got a Mustang, and a lot of GM cars mixed in here. And when I had experience with other vehicles from other manufacturers, I was always pleasantly surprised. And this is one of those vehicles. It is burned in my brain how nice I thought this was in like that 1987-ish year. So I have a very high opinion of this car. Would love to have a chance to drive one again and see just how rose-colored my glasses are. And in hindsight, looking back from today, if it was 1987 and I know what I know now, and they're like, here's $10,000, would you rather have a Dodge Shadow or a Honda Accord? There's absolutely no doubt I would get the Honda and that it would last much longer. But at the time, I love these cars. And they were kind of the peak for me of the small cars. But I didn't really put the Accord in with the small cars. So let me know what you think below, guys. If you had one of these, if you have positive, negative opinions of them, let me know. But this was a good one, and this one brought back a lot of memories for me. Ultimately, by the way, at the end, that family I knew, one of the kids actually wrecked one of these badly, totaled the car, and if I remember correctly, broke their back. They were fine, they healed, but the car held up. So, all in all, positive opinion of the car. Thanks for being here, guys. Appreciate it.